Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video, we'll be covering some tips and tricks on how you can solve the history board exam. So let's go over them one by one. So the first tip is write points, not stories. The more concise and to the point, the better. So there's a common misconception among us that the more big our answers are, the more space our answers occupy in the exam paper, the more marks we'll get. That can work to a certain extent in literature and language, but not in history exam. Right, history exam is all about magic words and points. If you can write those two in a very, very short space, then you would also get full marks for that, instead of getting half marks for a page-long answer. The second point is make easy to remember mnemonics and scenarios. So what this point basically means is that points are sometimes hard to remember. So say for example, especially if you study the civics part of the entire subject, it's very difficult to remember, the functions of the president, the functions of the speaker. There's an administrative function. There are various things to remember. There's the function of the chief judge, the appointment of the chief judge, etc. So it can be quite heavy to remember all these points. So what I would advise is to make as many mnemonics as you can and to stimulate scenarios in your mind. Right. So say for example, if you're asked about the functions of the prime minister, you could create instead of making a scenario, instead of providing a mnemonic to make a scenario, stimulate a scenario in your mind wherein you are the PM. And if you are the PM, what are the things that you have to take care of? So there's the international affairs, there's the domestic affairs, then you are the ex officio chairperson of the Niti Aayog and the Atomic Commission. So, I'm in 11th now, I'm almost going to 12th, and I still remember that point, right? Because it's a fun and playful scenario that I created in my mind, for which I can till date remember the points that were asked in class 10 finals. So it's a fun thing to do. If you can treat it as a fun thing to remember instead of a drag, then that would be helpful to you, right? So if we move on to the third point, in order to remember points effectively, associate words with points. So this is kind of a last resort, but say for example, if there are certain points that you have to remember wherein you can't associate mnemonics and scenarios, then what I would recommend is associating words, right? So say for example, if we have, again, if I take the previous example, the functions of the Prime Minister. So there's a point which also to date I remember. There's a point which says that all the opposition parties will support you even in the time of war, right? So that's a domestic issue, okay? And if I have to remember that single point, and if I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the point, so I can associate a single word with it, which is support or opposition support. That's it. And you can frame the point however you want to. It's not necessary to copy the point word to word from the textbook on the exam paper. The fourth point, probably the most important, attempt past 10-year history papers. It is extremely important. There will be a variety of questions asked. Variety as in, pardon, there will be a wide range of questions that will be asked and in the more or less same pattern, right? So in the exam, so say for example in the current specimen paper, they have asked about the First World War. In some other paper, they might ask about the Second World War, or they might ask a question about the rise of dictatorships. So you can prepare your mind to receive every challenge, right, and be able to solve it efficiently, right? So that's a good practice of solving the past 10-year papers. You are not caught unawares if the board asks you an unexpected question, right? So it's a helpful thing. The fifth point, memorize various acts, movements, missions, etc. The fifth point basically is related to the second subsection of the history part, which is the Gandhian phase. So we have the Rowlatt Act, we have the Cripps mission, we have the non-cooperation movement, we have the civil disobedience movement. So memorize various acts, movements, missions is related to this concept, right? Then the sixth point. So whatever points I'll be going from the fifth point onwards will be basically some important things to remember about certain chapters. Important chapters that are always asked, without a doubt, in board papers. The sixth point is remember important dates. Example, what I mean by this is assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Chori Chor incident, very important, and UN existence formation. When was the UN formed? When did it come into existence? Which is the third date, right? I'm saying these third dates because I memorized them well, which showed me very well in the history board exam. Many of my friends found that the exercise of memorizing dates was kind of tiresome, and but it helped me in the longer, and I'm sure it would help you. And then we move on to the next point. Remember important leaders and contributions. This applies to the first subsection and the second subsection. What I mean by that is the earlier nationalist phase, assertive nationalist phase, and the Gandhian phase. So important leaders in early nationalists, you have Dadabai Nairoji, etc. We have the assertive nationalists, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, we have the Gandhian phase, we have Gandhi, then we have Cripps, what was his contribution, the Cripps mission, the functions, etc. So these are important things to remember. In civics, it is important to memorize important political posts. And what I mean by that is President, PM, Speaker, Chief Judge, and the Chief Judges of High Courts and their respective junior judges. Right? Their election, procedure, function, and impeachment. So these three things are the most important. So if I'm again taking the example which I took a few moments ago of the Prime Minister. So if you have to follow this point methodology properly, you would follow the Prime Minister's election procedure, the Prime Minister's function, and the Prime Minister's impeachment. Even if you remember these 3 points, there is more than right. And then finally on our last step, which is in judiciary, remember jurisdictions and their subtopics. So we have appellate jurisdictions, etc., which is very important. In the specimen paper also they have asked us in the MCQ, and so say for example, as I said before, attempting the judiciary is not, at least I wouldn't recommend it because it was heavy for me, but in case you are thinking of attempting it, there's nothing wrong with it. So they have asked us explain the terms advisory jurisdiction, advisory jurisdiction. Right, so the jurisdictions are very important. And also in the MCQ, they have asked us, when a case comes from a subordinate court, the High Court deals with it under which jurisdiction? Is it the revisory, advisory, original, or appellate jurisdiction? So the jurisdiction is a very important part of the judicial, the overall judicial subsection under the civics part of their subsection. So that's it. That brings us to the end of the video. I hope you learned a lot from this video, and I hope you implement it in your paper. I'll be making a geography video shortly, which will be released in a few days. Until then, I'll see you. Have a great day, and bye-bye.